A few of you have run into some issues with using a big file or working on a big file in Photoshop. That's unfortunately one of the natures of the beast working with something this large. The files are going to be huge at 20 by 30, at 300 pixels per inch, and as you start adding layers into your working file, you'll probably notice things start to slow down and may take a while for things, typical things you're going to do, like moving or typing or something like that, may really take a while to kind of complete, as well as saving. So when you're saving your file, it may take a while. I still highly recommend saving as often as you can, even though if it takes a little bit of time, it's going to save you time in the long run. Because if you work for an hour or two without saving, even though your computer is running slowly, and you don't save and something crashes, you're out of luck and you're going to have to start all those steps again and have to wait again. So I highly recommend saving as often as you can. I brought this image up because it's a giant file. Okay, and I showed this one in the previous example. It's a former student's work. Notice he has a bunch of layers here, and this is a group so that he has even more layers in the group. Okay, I'm going to show you a few different things that you can try or do to help keep speeding things up. It's not perfect. A lot of it has to do with your processor and your computer. So if you have a fast computer, awesome. If you have a slow, older computer, it's the nature of the beast. It's gonna slow things down. Okay, so here are a couple things. Well, actually, before I do that, I want to point something out. You may have noticed there's numbers at the bottom of your screen. These two numbers, it's a document and it says 154.5 megabytes slash 3.68 gigabytes. What that tells us is if the file was flat, meaning there were no layers here, and it was a flat background layer document, it would still be 154.5 megabytes. That would be the file size it saves at. Here, with this 3.68 gigabytes, that's actually the file size with all the layers. So adding a layer definitely increases the overall file size. We need the layers to be able to edit our images, so there's really no way around that. There's a couple workarounds that I can show you, but right now there's no real way to kind of make it 154 the whole time. So what I want to show is a couple different ways to at least be able to work on your file and keep things flowing. The first thing you want to try is go under Photoshop, Preferences, and go down to Scratch Disks. So the way Photoshop works is it uses your RAM memory inside your computer that's built into your computer. If you have a bunch of other applications open, you might want to close those so Photoshop has access to more of the RAM that's in your computer. But basically, it uses RAM in your computer to work on the file. Now, as we've seen, these files are huge. So what it also does is it uses your hard drive as temporary storage, for keeping track of your history, keeping track of some of the changes, and reading and writing to this external hard drive, hard drive as a scratch disk, as it's called. And so sometimes the internal hard drive gets filled with other files. It will actually slow things down, and you may actually run into a situation where you can't write the file because the scratch disk is full. That means you don't have enough space to write to your hard drive. The workaround for that is to actually use external hard drives as your scratch disk. So you see here, I've got 3 drives listed. This one up top here is my internal hard drive. This one is an external hard drive that I plugged in, and I actually have another external hard drive that I can click here and add that as my scratch disk. Okay, and so what that allowed me to do is at least not run out of memory and hopefully allow me to write and edit my image faster. Okay, so that's one thing to try. So again, let me click OK and I'll show you where it's at. So Photoshop, preferences, scratch disk. All right. Another thing you can try to kind of keep things moving along is as you're working on your image, things kind of start building up. It builds up memory, keeps track of certain things, and so you want to get rid of some of those other elements. If you copy and paste or cut and paste within your document, you're cutting and pasting big chunks of information. Under the Edit menu, you can go down to Purge, and you can say Clipboard, which is the copy-paste, Histories, which is keeping track of all the steps that you've created, or both, with all, and it gets rid of all that stuff. So sometimes it's nice to clear that stuff out. The final way that I'm going to recommend for today is sometimes if you have multiple layers in your document and you've got the look you want and it's dialed in, what you can do is either merge layers together, which basically now they make them uneditable, or what you can do is create a smart object, which will help make the file smaller. Okay, so this main folder here has a bunch of layers in it. And what I want to show is that we go from this 3.68 gigabytes here. And when I go ahead and create a smart object from this, so what I'm going to do is, now I'm going to show you where the smart object is again. So under Filter, Convert for Smart Filters, that makes a smart object. Or I can right click or control click and say Convert to Smart Object. Okay, I've already done that, and I have a computer, my computer's about, it's 5 or 6 years old, which is, ancient in computer time. So I'm not going to bore you with the time it takes for me to convert this. So I actually did it earlier. So I'm going to go back to this. All right, so here's my history, my folder here. I'm going to go back to converting it to smart object. Notice it's no longer a folder, but it has that smart object icon. The key thing is it went from 3.68 to 1.76 gig. Okay, and so it effectively cut the file size in half, or at least the working file size here in Photoshop. It's still a big file, but at least it's now more manageable. So you definitely want to make sure you save that, okay, so you don't lose it. And if you ever need to go back in and edit your smart object here, you could just double click it and it'll open eventually. This is probably where I'm going to fast forward to show you that it actually took a long time, but I fast forwarded it. Okay, that took about 45 seconds to a minute for us to get to this area here, this point. And one thing, opening this up, one thing I just noticed is that when you have an image, if you have information outside of the visible area, that stuff gets stored with that file. Okay, which is pretty darn crazy. And so once we get back into our main document, I'll show you what I'm talking about. But notice that when we were looking at our image, this, our main image here, okay, really all we see is this face and the stuff below, okay? Well, here's the face and some of the stuff below, but look at all this extra stuff out here. Okay, this is adding file information to our document that we don't even see or need. So what we really need to do is get rid of some of that stuff, okay? And so I'm not going to do it here. I'm going to close this. I'm not going to save it. But here, let's go ahead and show what I'm talking about here. Here is that main document. All right, we know that pretty much this is the background image. Now notice when I move it over, this information is still part of my file. And as we saw here, he's got more information way out here that you won't even see. All right, so here's what I'm going to have you do. You can go ahead and use the crop tool. Now you want to crop it to the exact size. Now, before I do that, I want to make sure, and you need to make sure that anything that you do now, if you have anything outside you need to maybe readjust, that you want to shift over or whatever, it's going to go away once we crop this. With the crop tool, okay, we're basically clicking at this full size here, so we're not really trimming it off, but we are going to have this checked up here where it says delete cropped pixels. We're going to have that checked so that anything outside of this box goes away. All right. Now also, what we want to check is to see how the file size goes down. All right. So here I'm going to escape out of that, out of the crop tool. Again, with our smart object, we're at 1.76 gigabytes. Let's see if that reduces the size any. Delete crop pixels with our crop tool. Check that. Again, this may take a bit because it's a big file. And we're waiting. And we're waiting. Still with me? All right, look at that. So we did save a bit. It went from 1.76 to 1.51, right? That's 250 megabytes. That's a chunk of anything that we weren't seeing. So again, if I move this over now, this is our smart object, so we would actually need to crop that as well. And so I'm not going to do that now, but it cropped out anything on our main document. In our smart object here, we would have to go in and basically crop it to this, and then turn all these others back on. And now we have our final layout. And he's making good use of smart objects. I mentioned merging layers together. Again, if you wanted to and not create a smart object, you need layers that have similar blending modes here. And so what you can do is merge multiple layers together if the size gets to be a problem still. And so notice this one says normal blending mode and this one's screen, okay? We can't merge those two because it has to be either normal or screen, and this retouching here, whatever he's got on this layer, won't work if it's a different blending mode. Okay, so you need to have blending modes that are the same, that you can merge together. So this one and this one are normal, all right? So here I can select both of these and I can say layer, merge layers, okay? It blends the two together. Now you definitely want to make sure you take a look at your file to make sure it didn't do anything funky and change it. So these two, again, layer, merge layers, and you can see now our file size went from 1.5 to 1.3 gigabytes, okay? So those are kind of some little tricks to help speed things up. Just to recap, Photoshop preferences scratch disk is one. Specifying internal and external hard drives for your scratch disk, if you have that. Under Edit, Purge, Histories, Clipboard, or All, whatever you choose. That'll purge that from your memory. Using or taking multiple layers and creating it into a smart object. Remember, right-click to convert to smart object, or you can go to Filter, Convert for Smart Filters, which converts it to a smart object. And what else? Oh, and then just going in and taking layers that are of similar type, so like this one and this one are both multiply blending modes, selecting those two, layer, merge layers. The key thing is when you're doing anything like that, you want to make sure that visibly nothing changes, so that way you didn't mess up your document or mess up your layout by merging things together. I hope that helps. If you have any questions, please let me know.